Hi everyone, I'm Jane at Rockin' Worms. Hope you're having a good evening. What I'm doing tonight is making a bait cup or bait station that I'm going to put into my castings bucket to lure any hatched baby worms, wisps out of the castings and into a central location so I can pluck them out and then put them in with the rest of their brethren in another bin. So how am I going to do that? Well, we're going to figure this out together because this is the first time I'm doing this. So I did some research on good old YouTube and looked at what some other people were doing and adjusted it for my situation that I'm going to try. And I have a little twist at the end that will make it unique to me and help me with this process. So let's get started. I want to show you what I'm using. The first is a bucket of my castings. It says pre-composted coffee cardboard bedding. I had my working supply in here, but I used it all up. And I have a whole bunch more castings now that the garden is starting to slow down here in Southeast Florida. So my castings are starting to accumulate, which is also why I am considering doing this baiting out method to finish my castings, because up until now I didn't have enough castings to use, because as fast as I could get the castings, they were going into the garden. But now that I have more castings, I have the ability to do some baiting out. Okay, so that's the castings. Then I have a plastic berry container from the store. And what is nice about this, I think, is it's kind of like ready to go because there's slots in it. See, slots in it all the way around. And that's what the baby worms are going to use to come from the outside into this bait area. Okay. The next thing I have is the bait itself, which is, in this case, it's pumpkin, but any sweet treat that is a favorite of worms will work. Pumpkin, cantaloupe, bananas, apple, those are all really good baits for drawing in worms and wisps, okay? And this is, again, is based on my research that I did online, so we'll see whether or not that's true. And then this is my indoor tabletop pre-compost bedding, which I'm going to use to line the bait cup. And because it's full of unprocessed bedding and biota, this was also very attractive to any worms that are in the castings, because the castings, this is the castings that I took out of the bucket so I have a place to put the bait station. These castings do have, food particles in them, unprocessed, little micro foods, and of course biota as well, but not in the volume and attractiveness of the pumpkin and the bedding. So let's get this going. Oh, and this is going to be my little ad at the end, and I'll show you what I'm going to use that for. Okay. So what I did is I dug out a hole in my castings bucket about halfway down. Look at these castings, just by the way. Look at that. They're just beautiful, fluffy, dark. Still has moisture in it. Great stuff. Really happy with how my worms are producing these castings. Okay, so I dug a hole, and this is where my bait cup is going to go. Now, like I said, I'm going to use this berry container. I only need half of it. You don't have to have a top for your bait cup. So this way, I can actually have two bait stations, okay? Now, one thing I want to point out is this is a relatively small bait station. A lot of people use yogurt cups or snack cups, solo cups, and poke holes in it. So again, the worms can come in and you know, hang out in the center. Now, the reason I'm using a smaller bait station is that I sift my castings at the 1/12 inch screen. So what I have found is that generally speaking, I have very few cocoons in here, very few wisps. I will have some, okay? But I'll have, relatively speaking, a lot fewer of them than, say, someone who sifts at the 1/4 inch into their casting buckets, which is quite popular, I have found. But I prefer the finer castings at the 1/12 inch screen size. So I just feel that I'm going to have less cocoons and less, excuse me, and less wisps in here to begin with. But you know what? This bait station cup will tell me whether I'm right or wrong. I mean, you know, if I come back and it's full of baby worms, then I'll have to use a bigger bait station going forward. So let's find out. So how do I set this up? I'm just going to take some of the pre-compost bedding, put it on the bottom, and that's going to help soak up the liquid from this previously frozen, and then I microwaved it just a couple seconds to defrost it a little bit. But the pre-composted bedding will absorb some of that yummy juices, which will again attract the baby worms in. And then I'm going to cover it with more of the pre-compost on top. And this is almost ready to go. Gotta put my glasses on. All right, so I am going to put this in to the center. And again, I'm about, well, maybe just above half way down. I could have done it a little deeper, but this is fine. And basically, I think from, again, my understanding is you don't want your bait cup right at the top, because any baby worms that are on the bottom, you know, it's a long way for them to travel. They may not sense the food if they're that far away. So by putting the bait cup more towards the center of whatever size your container is, it's more likely that more baby worms will be able to sense the food and therefore come into it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to find one of these little slots here. Of course, now it's hard. There it is. Okay. I'm going to use one of the little slots, and I'm going to use this bamboo skewer that I used canning a couple days ago. And I don't want to use a skewer for any, you know, human food, even though I washed it. But it's great to use it in this kind of application. So I'm reusing it as opposed to throwing it away. And it's just going to anchor the bait container into the castings bucket. And this little flag is going to help me remember where the bait container is, because you would think I would remember that if I came back and it was just a solid surface in a week, but you would be giving me way too much credit. I would probably forget. So this little flag, I thought, you know what? That'll help me remember. So now all I'm going to do is put the castings back on top of the bait cup, and we're almost done. So this is pretty much what it is, folks. And I mentioned it briefly earlier, but this whole process is also referred to as finishing your castings. And the finishing part just means letting your castings sit for several weeks, up to several months, in order for any baby worms and cocoons to hatch and come into a bait station, and you can, again, pluck them out and put them into, you know, any bin or location you want. And the end result is that your castings are almost, because there's no guarantee, almost devoid of baby worms. This is especially important if you're putting your castings into potted plants, so you don't overwhelm a small pot with a lot of worms over time. And also if you're selling your castings, because buyers may or may not want worms in the castings that they're buying from you to go into their plant situation. So having the castings finished and have no baby worms or cocoons in there is, something that sometimes you do want to have that situation. All right, so here it is. I'm going to put the damp paper or newspaper on top just to keep the moisture in. We do have living biota in there, folks, as well as those cocoons and any potential wisps. So we do need moisture in there to keep everybody alive. And I'm going to put the top on. And that's it. I'm going to come back in a week to 10 days and see if I caught anybody. And see, how my 1/12 inch sifting is working as far as keeping cocoons and baby wisps out of my castings. All right, we'll see. So that's it. I hope you found this informative. I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It does help me very much. And otherwise, I am yours in the dirt, Jane.